It is 4:47 in the morning. The southern hemisphere winter wraps Santiago in a cold so dry it feels like breathing glass. The city is still. The streets are empty. And somewhere, in a neighborhood pressed between a bakery and a hardware store, a man named Ahmed spreads his prayer rug east, always east, and bows toward Mecca. Not Istanbul, not Cairo, not Karachi. Mecca, from Chile. The distance between him and the Kaaba is 11,200 kilometers, and yet the prayer is identical. The Arabic is precise, the intention is pure. Here is what nobody tells you about the Muslim world. It doesn't end at the edges of the Middle East. It doesn't fade somewhere over the Mediterranean. It survived a voyage across an ocean, climbed the Andes, and quietly put down roots in one of the most geographically isolated countries on earth. This is the story of Islam in Chile, of faith without a majority, of Ramadan without a culture that recognizes it, of a community that chose and keeps choosing to remain. Chile is a strip of land so narrow and so long it defies logic. From the driest desert in the world in the north to glaciers that grind slowly into the Pacific in the south, it spans more latitude than the entire continental United States. Roughly 19 million people live here. They are Catholic, mostly, overwhelmingly so. 90 years ago, the number was closer to 95%. And yet, walk through the Patronato district of Santiago, the old immigrant quarter, and something shifts. Signage gets denser, fabric shops appear, the coffee gets thicker, and tucked between Lebanese restaurants and Palestinian-owned textile warehouses, you find mosques. Small ones, yes, but real ones, functioning ones where the call to prayer goes out 5 times a day, in Spanish, in Arabic, in the layered accent of a community that belongs entirely to both worlds and fully to neither. Today, Chile is home to somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 practicing Muslims, a modest number in a country of millions, but the number alone misses the point entirely, because what matters is not how many, it is how long and how hard. This is not a community that arrived last decade on work visas. These are families whose great-grandparents crossed the Atlantic with nothing but a name, a faith, and the stubborn refusal to disappear. They came, and they stayed, and they prayed. And now their grandchildren are fasting through a Chilean winter, going without water from pre-dawn until the sun drops behind the coastal mountains, in a country where almost no one around them is doing the same. That is not a footnote. That is a feat. Let's go back. The year is 1895. A young man, let's call him Khalil, because that was the most common name among them, steps off a steamship at the port of Valparaiso. His papers say Turco, Turkish, not because he is Turkish, but because he carries an Ottoman Empire passport, and the Chilean immigration clerk sees no reason to distinguish further. He is, in fact, Palestinian, from a small village near Bethlehem or Homs or the Bekaa Valley. The records are imprecise, the stories competing. He speaks Arabic, a little French, and approximately 30 words of Spanish, none of them useful yet. He has a suitcase. He has relatives in Valparaiso who arrived 6 months before him and sent back a letter. Come, there is work. The people are generous. Bring fabric. And so Khalil becomes a peddler. He walks. That is the job description in full. He walks from town to town through the Chilean Central Valley, a landscape of vineyards and eucalyptus groves and thin mountain roads, carrying bolts of cloth on his back. He sells on credit, keeps his accounts in his head, and learns Spanish through negotiation. He sleeps in other people's homes, eats whatever is offered, and after dinner, when the family has gone to bed, He unrolls a worn prayer rug in the direction he calculates to be east and prays. No mosque, no imam, no community. Just the prayer, the rug, and 11,000 kilometers of faith. By 1920, enough of these men, and their families who followed, had gathered in Santiago to form something resembling a community. They pooled money. They built a small prayer room above a fabric shop on Calle Compañía. They debated in Arabic about whether their children should marry Chileans, whether they were losing themselves, whether the distance from home was permanent or temporary. The answer, as history settled it, was permanent. The children grew up bilingual. The grandchildren grew up Chilean, with Arabic surnames, a faint memory of a village they'd never seen, and a faith that had become, against all demographic logic, a Chilean faith. By 1926, the first formal mosque in South America was established in Santiago. It was not grand, but it was theirs. What the Palestinian and Lebanese immigrants built in Chile is one of the under-examined immigrant stories in the Western Hemisphere. They didn't arrive with political power or capital. They arrived with persistence. They became merchants, then businessmen, then politicians. 2 Chilean presidents carried immigrant Arab blood. The community integrated without erasing itself. That balance is extraordinarily difficult to maintain. Most immigrant communities, within 3 generations, lose the thread. The Muslims of Chile, outnumbered, isolated, geographically severed from the broader Islamic world, held on. Now imagine Ramadan.
In most Muslim-majority countries, Ramadan transforms everything. The streets empty at iftar time, then flood again. Shops close at Fajr. Lanterns hang across alleyways. The air smells of dates and rosewater and hot bread. The fast is personal, but the experience is communal, held up, reinforced, made bearable by the simple fact that everyone around you is doing it too. In Santiago, Ramadan arrives with no such scaffolding. The alarm goes off at 4:30 in the morning for suhoor, the pre-dawn meal. You eat quietly, alone or with your family, while your Chilean neighbors sleep. You go to work at 8. Your colleagues order empanadas for lunch and offer you one, and you say, "No, thank you, I'm fasting," and they say, "Again?" because they asked the same thing last year and forgot. Which is not cruelty, it is simply the texture of being a minority. By 4 in the afternoon, after 8 hours without water in a heated office, the concentration gets difficult, not impossible, just expensive in terms of will. And then the sun sets, and you break your fast with a date and a glass of water, just as 1 billion people across 12 time zones are doing the exact same thing at their own sunset. And for a moment, just a moment, the distance collapses. You are not in Santiago. You are not isolated. You are part of something so large and so old that no ocean can contain it. This is what practicing Muslims in Chile describe when asked about Ramadan. Not hardship primarily, presence, a sharpening of attention that the comfort of a majority culture never demands from you. When you are the only one fasting in a room, the fast means something different. It cannot be passive. It cannot be cultural habit. It must be chosen, consciously, every single hour. In a strange way, the absence of community pressure produces a purer form of commitment. You fast because you mean it, because there is no social consequence for quietly eating at noon and telling no one. The mosque in Santiago fills to capacity during Ramadan evenings. Converts sit beside third-generation Arab Chileans. Moroccan students pray next to Pakistanis on work contracts. A Chilean woman in her 30s who took her Shahada 2 years ago stands in the women's section, her Spanish Quran open, reciting haltingly but with total sincerity. This is a minority community doing what minority communities have always done at their best, finding each other, recognizing each other, and making a small circle of warmth in a large, indifferent world. And outside, Santiago continues. The traffic doesn't stop, the bars don't close, the city doesn't know, and the city doesn't need to know. The faith survives on its own terms. Here is what this story actually teaches us, if we're willing to hear it. Faith is not fragile. It is not a plant that dies without the right climate. It is something closer to a river. It finds its shape around the obstacles, moves slower through the hard ground, but keeps moving. The first Muslim peddler who prayed alone in a Chilean farmhouse in 1898 did not need a minaret. He needed intention. That was enough then. It is enough now. And there is a second lesson, quieter but just as important. Identity is not lost by contact with difference. It is sharpened by it. The Muslim community in Chile is not a diluted version of something that exists more fully elsewhere. It is its own version, distinct, adapted, real. It carries Arabic surnames and votes in Chilean elections and fasts through the Southern Hemisphere winter and belongs completely to both the country it lives in and the faith it keeps. That is not a contradiction. That is what human beings do when they are at their most resilient. They hold complexity without flinching. They say, I am this and this and this, and none of those things cancel each other out. 11,000 kilometers from Mecca, the prayer rug still faces east. Some things do not require proximity to remain whole. If this story made you think differently about faith, distance, or what it means to belong, then Fact Seeker is doing exactly what it set out to do. We find the stories that don't make headlines, the communities that don't trend, the histories that deserve more than a footnote. Subscribe, hit the bell, because the world is stranger, richer, and more connected than the algorithm wants you to believe, and we'll keep proving it.